Hello guys, I'm Carla Natali, and if you didn't see my first video, I'm here to do the reading of my first novel called Two. It's a thriller, and I'm here to read it a little bit for you guys and see if I can get you interested in it, okay? So here we are, let's go. Okay, so chapter 1, and Ye. First, I would like to apologize in advance for my heavy accent. I'm Brazilian, and when it comes to English, I'm self-taught, so please have a little patience, okay? If you're not understanding my accent very well, please leave a comment and I'll do my best to improve it, okay? Thank you. Let's go. Chapter 1, and Ye. It was a sultry night, and even though the large bedroom window was wide open, the air was still, just like Catherine's heart for a second or two before she opened her eyes. She woke up, startled, soaked in sweat. Another nightmare. Is that what it was? There was no way to be sure. She couldn't remember, even remotely, what had upset her to the point of waking up gasping for air. These dreams were nothing like the bad ones she was used to having. They left no sneaky images hiding behind her eyelids, just waiting for her to close them, even for a moment, to reveal themselves. She was willing to do that, to close her eyes back again and follow the thread back to her unconscious. But no matter how hard she tried, nothing happened. It felt like standing at the edge of an abyss, where a fragile plank bridge hung, ripped apart, staring at a hole out of pitch black ignorance. Excuse me. But even though she saw nothing, her aching bones and sore muscles could sense something crouching at an unknown depth, staring back at her from the darkness. It felt as if an invisible hand was contracting rapidly around her heart, forcing it into unnatural speed. She took a deep breath, compelling her heart back to its normal pace, and finally, regaining control after repeating the process for 2 or 3 times. She then wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, and refusing to let herself be alarmed by how hot or wet her skin was, she went to the kitchen, had a glass of water, and sat on the couch, assuming it would be pointless to go back to bed, since dawn was only an hour away. As she laid back her head and closed her eyes for a moment, a scent of freshly washed clothes, which she hadn't noticed before, flooded her nostrils. I bet Crystal had her share of insomnia, she thought, taking another deep breath, as if that smell could wash away another one, less pleasant. It wasn't the first time she woke up from a dream she couldn't remember. It had been happening for a while now, and even though she was not a fan of the almost limitless stock of horrifying images stored in her consciousness, and their capacity to reassemble themselves in a nightmare that would put the scariest movies to shame, these blank dreams, wrapped in a weird iron scent, would frighten her even more. They were somewhat different, caused anguish, tiredness, and a smell that clung to her nostrils long after she had awakened. They were particularly disturbing. Going back to bed will do me no good. It's almost time to wake up, and if I fall asleep again now, I'll feel even more worn out when the alarm goes off. I'd better cuddle up here on the couch and just try to relax a little. She turned on the TV in time to watch a dog food commercial that pictured kids running around in a big green backyard chasing a leaping golden retriever. She remembered always wanting a dog as a child. If only her life had been a little like the corny ad, she thought. She remembered the place she grew up in an old 2-story house with a brown, grassless little backyard with a swing set on which she and her siblings used to play. She could almost hear the squeaking sound of the old rusty swing set involved in children's laughter. Catherine had a twin sister who was born dumb, and two other young half brothers, John and Michael, who were only a year apart from each other. The eldest of the boys, John, was 6 years younger than the twins. She didn't have many memories of her father, but she treasured the few she managed to keep, such as the way he lifted her up in the air, the way he used to tell her stories sitting at the edge of her bed, and the tenderness with which she tucked her in. He had a gentle look, and never complained about getting her a glass of water in the middle of the night whenever she asked for it. Her father, Jared Weaver, was a writer and spent most of his days at home with the kids, while her mother went to work. She worked as a bartender in a place nearby and would come home late at night, sometimes even in the early hours of the day. Jared was trying to get his novel published, with no success. Therefore, her mother Louise had to support the house on her own. Despite Catherine's young age and her father's effort not to let it show, the girl realized that her parents' relationship was deteriorating fast. She could hear them arguing behind closed doors and her mom crying. She found her father sleeping on the couch a few times. He blamed it out on insomnia and said that the humming sound of the TV was the only thing that could put him back to sleep. He came up with excuses just fine, but she was no fool and could sense the tension in the air. She knew things weren't all that well. She could see the change in his eyes. That softness was giving way to something dark, as if its greenish brown color was suddenly becoming more brown than green, as if the swamp of sadness growing inside him had gotten so big to the point of overflowing into his eyes. One day, when she was only 4, she went looking for her dad to open a jar of cookies. She called him over and over, as it didn't answer. She went to the basement to check whether he was working on his novel or something, and found him there, only not working. His manuscript was ripped and scattered all over the floor, as his body hung lifeless from a rope tied to the ceiling beam, rocking gently from side to side, with a chair kicked aside. Life would never be the same. Catherine's memories of her mother were not as few, or as much treasured. Louise was never an easy person to live with, but after Jared's suicide and the increase of her already heavy drinking, life with her became a living hell. She stayed at home with the girls for less than 2 years. They used to live on the government's pension, and it was enough to feed the 3 of them, but obviously it didn't leave much to spare for booze. Therefore, she decided to go back to work, claiming that she wasn't cut out to be a stay-at-home mom. The twins were 6-year-old by then, and she resolved, with her brain soggy with alcohol, that they were old enough to be at home on their own, and she claimed her old job back, but this time taking the daytime shift. If a social worker came to the house, the girls had instructions to call her immediately, and she would rush home with bags and pretend she had gone out real quick to get some groceries. But the fact is, they never did come by. A few months later, Louise was pregnant again. When John was born, Catherine was almost 8 years old. The baby's father was a guitar player named Brian, who Louise met at the bar. His face was no more than a blur to Catherine, although she could still remember his voice, always loud, shouting at her mother, and echoing throughout the house. Brian and Louise stayed a little over a year together, but the children rarely saw him. He went out every night to drink and perform with his band and afterwards slept all day. Still, Louise managed to have not 1, but 2 more of his children. She gave birth to Michael 2 weeks after John had turned 1 year old, and then Brian was gone, without even registering any of the kids under his name. Louise finally gave up the idea of working and decided to live on the pension alone. She didn't set her mind on the idea of being a full-time mother, though, and the feeling that she hated the children started to grow inside her almost as quickly as the liquor was drained from her glass. As the children didn't get any of their mom's attention, Catherine felt she had to step up and fill the void, despite the fact that she was only a kid herself. She would bathe, feed, and tuck them in at night. It got to the point where the 10-year-old had to take care of the house and the kids, but still, instead of resenting them, she cared for her half-brothers, made her love. She caring for her half-brothers made her love them even more. She protected them as a lioness would protect its cubs. She missed them to death. Well, at least now Crystal is around. She couldn't help smiling. The humming sound of the TV had a soothing effect on her as well. Maybe her genes were to blame, and she soon fell asleep, forgetting all about her nightmares, cradled by the sweet memories of her father. She awoke with the sunlight warming her face, pouring in through the large living room window. She glanced at the clock, 7 a.m. It was still too early to go to work, and yet there was no way she could sleep another whole hour. Ah, whatever. I'll have breakfast somewhere, read the papers, and kill some time. She went to the bedroom silently, took a quick shower, changed clothes, and left. She didn't want to wake up Crystal. It was too early, and judging by the wet clothes hanging in the laundry room, she probably hadn't slept all that well herself. It was about 8 a.m. when she got to the station, wearing no jeans and a white tank top. As detective, she didn't have to wear a proper uniform, but jeans and plain t-shirts came close to being one. On her way to the office, she bumped into her partner. "Hey, Robert, what happened to you today? Got kicked out by your girlfriend?" She had an acid sense of humor that caused her trouble every now and then, but never with Robert. He totally got her. "What? First of all, I have no girlfriend. Second, I'm always on time, if that's what you're trying to imply." He acted outraged, but only as a bad actor would. "Not a steady one, at least," she winked at him. "Seriously now, I'm glad you're here already. I'm eager to start working on that new case." "What new case? The one that got closed yesterday?" he interrupted. "What the hell are you talking about? What do you mean closed?" "Closed, honey. Soon after you left, the autopsy report came in. Evidence of previous lesions were found. Broken bones, cigarette burns, well, the typical child abuse stuff. And as there was no sign of forced entry or a single fingerprint, the mother was considered the strongest suspect. They're bringing her in tomorrow for further questioning, but it's pretty much over for us." Catherine was one of the most important investigators in the New York Homicide Department. She specialized in serial killers, and by the age of 32, she was the youngest female ever to reach that position. Since she joined the action, and for about 3 years she had been working on serial killings, and she risen indeed, as fast as a rocket in her career, which left room for some mean speculations. Catherine was a tall, lean woman, a very elegant figure. A cascade of light brown, straight hair ran down her back, right to the middle of it. Her features were delicate, a small nose, fine lips, and well-defined eyebrows, framing a set of impossibly big, green, almond-shaped eyes. Those eyes held a very peculiar feature, a well-defined triangle, as black as the night. She was very firm and decisive when it came to work, and could be a little rough sometimes. Some people could find working with her a bit of a challenge, but everybody knew she was the type of person who got the job done, no matter what. She dressed with discretion, and it was a manly environment. and she could tell that most of those men didn't like to report to a woman. So she decided to keep a low profile and try to blend in as much as possible, limiting her wardrobe to jeans, tank tops, and an old black leather jacket, matching neatly ancient leather boots. She kept her private life private, so not even her own partner knew much about it. Most of the guys who worked with her had tried to ask her out at one point, but she'd always declined politely. The idea of mixing business and pleasure was somewhat disturbing for her, and she was at work most of the time or thinking about it. She didn't have much of a personal life anymore. Recently, she even had to turn down a New York Times reporter called Hawk, who, after interviewing her about a serial killer she had arrested, had the nerve to ask her out. After a while, the invitations just ceased, and the guys started to see her as untouchable, the proudest one swearing that she preferred girls. Catherine was aware of those rumors, but she couldn't care less what was said about her private life. It made no difference what people thought about her as a person, as long as they respected her as a professional, and they did. Since her twin sister had started living with her again, she became even more reclusive, avoiding any kind of gathering with her colleagues, including the department happy hours. She wanted to dedicate all her free time to her sister. She was called as soon as any evidence appeared in a case that would suggest a serial killing. Catherine had a way of thinking, just like the killers, as she was after, predicting their next move. She called it intuition, her enemies, witchcraft, and her boss, he just called it media silencer. She felt as if she was inside the killer's head and could see through their eyes. And even though she dealt with the most brutal cases, she never resented her gift. Once she was involved with a new case, she stripped away all emotion. It was like none of that was real, as if the victims were no more than dummies, and the only thing she focused on was the puzzle to be solved, a solution, what she wanted from the beginning, to get the bad guy behind bars, and she had been accomplishing her goal beautifully. This new case was intriguing her, not only because of its violent nature, or the fact that the victim was a child, she was used to the horror, but the fact that the boy was probably asleep when he was murdered. The victims being asleep eliminated the possibility of the action of a serial murderer. That kind of killer fed on their victims' panic right before they got butchered, and that was usually the rush that would drive them to kill again. That was probably what led the chief, prematurely in her opinion, to close the case in an episode of child abuse that ended tragically. But she knew that it had to be something else. The cross carved on the kid's forehead didn't look like something that any abusive parent would do, no matter how sick he or she might be. It didn't feel right. "I'm going out with Logan for a coffee. Do you want anything?" Robert asked. "No thanks, I just got breakfast at Perkins." "You did? This is so not right." "What?" "You and me, we're partners. We're supposed to clutter our arteries together. That's the tradition in police," he said, shaking his head as if to show her he was profoundly disappointed. "Right, we should. I promise to try to remember that next time," she said, it already on her way to the office. She threw herself into her chair and rotated her head, trying to release some of the tension in her neck. She was feeling completely drained, as if she hadn't slept at all, and decided to blame the pain on the uncomfortable nap on the couch. The phone rang as soon as she laid her head back. From the other end of the line, she heard her partner say in a deep, troubled voice, "It seems like we have a serial killer on the loose. I'm heading to Westchester County, Scarsdale with Logan. Come quick." "The suburbs? What's the address?" Ennis Road, 557. Come quick. She hung up the phone and felt a chill run through her spine. Her partner didn't say much, but she knew exactly what he was talking about. Her suspicion that the slaughter of that kid was not an isolated event had just been confirmed. She hopped into the car and drove off to the crime scene, her siren screaming and her heart pounding. As she stepped on the gas, she started wondering what she was so anxious about. Was it because she turned out to be right, or because of what she was about to see? Obviously, the scene wasn't going to be pleasant. If it was a serial killing, the victim was obviously another child, but she'd seen worse sights. This shouldn't be bothering her so much. What was truly vexing her was not being able to embody the character she conjured up for work, Ice Cream. Her co-workers had given her that nickname a few years ago, and it had stuck. Catherine became very fond of it and was secretly glad that this was the one that stuck. This is pathetic, Catherine. Get a grip, she reprimanded herself, annoyed with her own vulnerability. This crime scene was quite different from the previous one. It was in the suburbs, for starters. It was really rare that something worse than a teenage fight would happen in that neighborhood. The place was swarming with people, police cars and ambulances, occupying the driveway, the immaculate lawn, and filling the street with sounds completely alien to it. She forced her way through the crowd, holding her badge up high, crossed the crime scene line, and walked through the front door, which was wide open. The double door led to a spacious hall that led straight to a flight of stairs. There was a living room on the right and a dining room to the left. She didn't look for her partner. She wanted to see things for herself before she gave her lowdown on what happened. He gave her the lowdown on what had happened on a proud platter. She needed to see, smell, and evaluate everything using her own senses and not hear somebody else's version of what was there and why. She had a lot of respect for Robert. She thought a great deal of him, despite the rumors, but she couldn't trust anyone but herself. That attitude alone pretty much answered the question of why no one wanted to be her partner. It was a fair living room. Two big windows lit the room abundantly. Portraits that dressed up the walls, and a black piano gave it a classy touch. She had seen that before. She could almost bet that no one in that house knew how to play the instrument, but still it sat there as part of the decoration. The piano was covered with family pictures, kids in the backyard playing in the park, on a skiing trip, holding dripping ice cream cones, cheerful memories framed in silver, brass, and maple. It was like a cereal commercial, all so colorful, so happy, so perfect that it could only be a lie. Her cell phone rang. "Where the hell are you? We're all waiting for you." Robert sounded agitated. "Downstairs," she replied as cool as ice. "Christ!" He sounded a little embarrassed. "We're waiting for you to evaluate the crime scene." "I am." She hung up the phone. She tried her best to sound polite, but the truth was she didn't like the tone he used. If she needed time to look around, everyone else should wait, patiently. That wasn't said out loud, but it was clearly understood, for he got down from the second floor and sat quietly on the sofa while she walked calmly through the room, glancing at every detail. She locked her hair up in a ponytail and took a deep breath. Her partner had seen her act the same way in every crime scene there ever been in together before. Ice Queen was slowly surfacing, so much more slowly than ever before that it became so upsetting to the point that she chose to ignore it. She looked through the entire ground floor of the house, finishing her investigations in the kitchen. where she found an open door that probably led to the basement. There were voices coming from it. What did you find there, boys? She asked the two forensic investigators, as well as Logan, who were surrounding the small ventilation flap window. I'm saying an adult couldn't pass through this. Don't you agree, Catherine? Logan, the man who used to be her partner when she first joined the force, had given Robert a lift to the crime scene, was now following the forensic progress. She asked that while he kept his arms across his chest. Catherine didn't like anyone sniffing around her territory, but the truth was, this was still anyone's game. The case wasn't hers yet, but she had a feeling it would soon be. There's only one way to be sure, she replied. I've been looking for you all over, Robert said, popping his head at the top of the stairs. A few minutes later, he got down in time to see Logan helping Catherine up from the ground. Why is that? She replied, putting her leather jacket back on. Were you dozing in the couch while I was conducting the investigation? She said with a smile curling at the corner of her mouth. Ha ha, very funny. I just went outside for a minute to talk to the press. They're going to put pressure on this one. Especially your sweetheart Hawk. They already know there's a link between the two cases. Don't be an ass, she growled at his remark about the reporter. What is happening here anyway? What were you doing on the floor? Nothing much. Will you show me the bedroom? She said with a dismissive gesture of her hand, already starting to climb the stairs. Yes, Robert was her partner, but it felt impossible for her not to keep some information for herself, especially when she was honest enough to confess dealing with the press. When he was honest enough to confess dealing with the press and trying to make his face recognizable by the reporters was a priority over the investigation process itself. Sorry about before, I didn't realize you were. It's fine, she interrupted him. I should have let you know I was already here. Shall we? She said, pointing to the stairs leading to the second floor. Sure. She followed him quietly. They climbed the stairs to the second floor and walked down a hallway. As he was walking right in front of her, she could only smell his perfume, but as they got to the bedroom door, he stepped aside, giving way to a wave of air drenched in the smell of death, which hit her like a brick. At the same time, a horrendous scene was displayed in front of her eyes, making her sick to the point of having to cover her mouth to control a sudden urge to vomit. She pretended to cough and removed her hand as swiftly as she could, hoping no one had noticed it. But Robert had and stared at her with a puzzled look. That was not her typical behavior. The policewoman regained control and entered the room, frustrated by her own reaction. Loud talking, sirens, the twinkling of tools, and a compulsive crying that seemed to come from somewhere along the hallway. The house was filled with all kinds of noises. Catherine took a deep breath and waited until all started to fade away as she crawled into a silent place within, where nothing or no one could bother her. She was completely focused again, and that set her at ease, peace in the middle of hell. Oh, I guess that was a little over half an hour. I hope you have enjoyed it. I'll continue it tomorrow. Keep coming back, please. Thank you.